Planetary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
He wants a challenge. Let's give him one.
The voice that whispers in your ears are the screams that you fear. The mind you cannot defy is the heart that rules mankind. The people who made you are the gods that will save you. I am Steve Travesty. I am the voice. The ghost in the machine. Ghost in the Machine, Tuesdays, 8 p.m., Studio A.
Right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Now, I was given the understanding in the chat room that there was a little bit of a misunderstanding about something I said before I went to break. I am going to have Chris Everard, but that's not today. That's further in the road. Today, my next guest is Janice Carlson, and she should be on hold right now because I just called her, and we're going to discuss her book, Soul Sensing. So, Janice, are you with me?
I am.
Oh, good. I was trying not to, I was thinking about calling you after the show went live so you wouldn't be confused just hearing music and nobody saying anything, but I changed my mind and caught it just as the break time was going off, in other words.
Oh, that's all right. I've done so many radio shows, I'm kind of used to that.
Oh, I wish I knew that, because I didn't think to warn you in advance. Well, Janice, I want to thank you for returning to my show. I mean, this is the first time you've done it from a slot over here at Revolution Radio, but you know, it's still, you know, my Talk Now radio is just being hosted by them.
Mm-hmm.
So, at any rate, getting back to your book now, it's been a while since we've had this show and I've read it, but I think we could start out with you telling everybody a little something about yourself and what it was that got you interested in writing about this particular topic.
Well, I was a novel writer, and prior to that I was writing advertising for various firms here in Minneapolis. And then I started writing novels under the pen name Ashland Price for New York publishers. And as I was doing that, I did that for about 9 years. And I hired a freelance graphics artist in the 90s. It was the mid-90s, I'd say. And I asked her to create some graphics and stuff for some of the books novels I was writing, so I could promote them. And when I hired her, she said, "Well, I work out of my home. Come on over and we'll have a chat." And she lived nearby, and it was a townhouse that she lived in. And I told her, I said, "I recognize this townhouse. I knew the former owner who sold it to you." And she said, "I like this townhouse. This is really nice, but I wish that the previous owner had told me it was haunted before she sold it to me." And I said, "Boy, that sounds really unusual, because I've known, the previous owner for years. We've been up here for parties and things, and I just think she would have mentioned the fact that the place was haunted if that was what was going on. Because she was the kind of owner who'd tell you when she was shampooing carpets and all the kind of trivial stuff. So it just didn't resonate for me. And as I walked farther into this townhouse, and I was taking in all the new decorating that Jody, the graphics artist, had done with it and so forth, and my eye was caught by this picture on the piano, a framed picture. And I said, "I don't know how I know this, but that lady in that photo is the one that's haunting you." And she said, "Oh, that's my mother. She died about 6 years ago in a horseback riding accident." And I said, I don't know how I know this, but she's talking to me in my head. about things. I mean, it seems like she wants me to say things to you that don't make any sense to me. So I just started, I said, what does Lady Jane mean to you? And to my amazement, she just started to cry. This graphics artist was just in pieces. And she said, I haven't heard that in years. That was my nickname. When I was a little kid, my mother would call me that. And so I just kept bringing through whatever popped into my head, because clearly this woman was compelling me to talk to her daughter. And in retrospect, that made sense, because the mother had died so suddenly in this horseback riding accident out in Montana, and was so far away from her kids when it happened, didn't have a chance to say goodbye. And so it made sense to me that she'd be anxious to bring through messages, and that she'd even maybe engage in some activities we might think of as hauntings in order to get her daughter's attention. And after realizing all of that, I guess I started to just try to digest the idea that there was something up with me, that I had some ability I was not aware of. And I later found out that ability is called medium, being a medium ability, a medium. And so I kind of put that aside for a while, because I had all these book deadlines. And then as the years went by and friends would have relatives who died and so forth, I would offer to do the same thing for them, bring through messages from the deceased loved one, to just see if it would keep happening, because I wasn't sure if it was just that one incident or what. The only thing I knew ahead of that was that there were several deaths in my family when I was a kid, like about age 10. Several family members died around that time, and I always know they were dead before I was told they were dead. And that ability is called presaging death. And so if you have that ability, it's very likely that you've got medium abilities as well.
That's kind of a spooky ability, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you just sort of know before somebody tells you. And again, it can be argued that if it's a sudden death, that's one thing. But if it's someone who's been lingering with cancer or something for a while, what's so unusual about you knowing it ahead of time? But if you do have this ability, you'll know that it's unusual, because there just won't be many warnings ahead of time that this is cooking, that somebody is actually passing. And so, yeah, I guess you could consider it spooky, but that's only because we don't understand it very well. There's a lot of that we don't understand about subatomic matter, which I talk about in my book, Soul Sensing, is what do we become when we die? Everybody talks about where do we go when we die, and that's a really legitimate thing to ask. And I think the best people to ask are people who've had near-death experiences, because they can tell you an awful lot. But a medium is probably more interested in what do we become when we die, because when you look at it, it appears that it's subatomic matter, which has all sorts of properties that a physical body doesn't. It has the ability to go through solid surfaces, like walk through a wall. It has the ability to be in two places at once. And that would explain why two different family members far apart would get a message from a dying relative at about the same time. It isn't bound by gravity or time, so some of the deceased spirits I talk to will be able to predict the future. And I have that on my website, JaniceCarlson.com, predictions, and it's predictions from a deceased man who I read for his widow frequently, and he makes all these predictions about world events and things that have come true. And so they're not bound by time and gravity. They tend to float instead of walk. And it's just really an interesting thing how we become an energy that's very close to light, which makes these beings luminous. In a dark room, for instance, often a ghost will seem luminous. And so that's why, again, I do a lot of things in my book, and one of the things I tell people is try not to refer to your dead loved ones as ghosts, because they do find that kind of hurtful. It's better to refer to them as spirits, or if they're highly evolved angels.
I was about to say the description you were given sounded something like an angel, but ghosts fit a different description. Isn't there a difference between the spirit you were describing and a ghost?
Maybe not in physical form. There isn't much of a difference in the way that you describe their physicality, but in the way that they act. It's more of a distinction between haunting versus visiting than ghosts versus spirits. Haunting behavior is often menacing. It's meant to be negative very often, and to be maybe hurtful and certainly scary. Whereas visitation from a deceased loved one or pet is not meant to scare you or startle you. It certainly will make you aware of the presence of this dead loved one, but it's not meant to scare you. And that's really the big difference, is that ghosts don't mind scaring people. And in fact, that may be their goal.
Okay. Now, I want to remind everybody that the number to call in is 347-688-2902, and that's for Studio A. She'd love to answer your questions. You want to call on in or maybe make a comment. Now, coming back to your book, however, when I read your book, what I did notice from it was, this mediumship wasn't something you were just gifted with per se. I mean, one day you realized you had it when you didn't, but it took time to actually develop it and hone it afterwards. Is that correct?
Not so much for me. I think to stay in the swing of the thing, you should, practice it frequently. But, it really was more for me a matter of analyzing the process of talking to the dead and the things that they do to talk to us. Very often we're being visited by a loved one and we just don't realize it. And that's the most valuable thing this book has to give, is becoming aware of the signs of visitation, so that when your deceased loved ones and pets are trying to communicate with you or answer a question you've posed to them somehow, that you're not afraid of it and you know how to interpret it.
And I remember that you had listed several different ways to recognize when you're trying to be contacted by your loved ones, which I don't think you want to go down the whole entire list per se and break it down, but I think it was, at least 15 or more different ways, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's quite a long list. And it seems like it's growing every day. Every time I do a medium session, I'll hear something else that blows me away, that, my client will tell me of visiting events, things that have occurred that seemed quite odd to me. I had one woman tell me that there was an ant crawling around in her hair. And she thought the things that have been happening around in this house, it's an aunt who's visiting me. She meant A-U-N-T, obviously, and it was someone who was an aunt in the family that was visiting. So, the symbolism can be really pretty amazing. And most of the symbolism is quite literal, too, by the way. But there are many points in the book about there are chapters in the book about how to actually do afterlife communications with simple tools like a pendulum. And one of the things I tell people to look for a lot is synchronicity and coincidences in their life, because that's a really strong language for the dead. You'll be thinking about a deceased loved one, and then suddenly, a couple minutes later, a song will come on the radio that was your song, or that meant something in particular between the two of you. So, I ask people all the time to look for these signatures that would tell you it's that particular person that's visiting.
But if you do pick up on something like that, you really have no way to know without being a medium what they're trying to convey to you, do you?
You do with the tips in my book. I mean, the tips in my book really help you open up a dialogue with that spirit. And, two, to go along with that is a lot of cautionary advice about how to avoid talking to someone you don't want to talk to on the other side, or inviting in spirits that would not be, that don't know you and would not be friendly.
Have you ever had an experience with an unfriendly spirit?
Yep, I certainly have. And it's usually in settings that people say are haunted. I'm not myself a ghost hunter, but on occasion I've worked with ghost hunters where I'm picking up energy that is just really not good energy. It's just rotten, you can tell. And I have to tell people it's not always demonic. You're not always dealing with demonic energy. You just often are dealing with a spirit who is having kind of a turf war over the particular house that's haunted. They want to stay there, and the people who occupy it now want them to go.
Yeah, I've also heard tell that sometimes what you're dealing with in those cases is residual energy, too.
Yes. I mean, there are different kinds of hauntings that I talk about in my books that are kind of common knowledge in the paranormal community, like residual hauntings, repetitive hauntings. Residual is kind of interesting because, you know, when you look at a place like Gettysburg, where so many people died in just such a short period of time, very violent, sudden deaths, very young, vital people, you have unfinished business, but you've probably got an awful lot of residual energy there, too. Because I've heard that in reading about Gettysburg hauntings, that if the house was standing, the haunted house at Gettysburg, whatever house we're talking about, farmhouse or whatever, if the house was standing during that battle, it often has haunting activities in it. However, if an addition was put onto the house after that battle, you don't see the haunting going on in that addition to the house. So it seems as though it's not only residual, but the spirits are sort of confined to the area that they were in at the time.
That kind of makes me wonder, if you wanted to and you had the money, could you just tear down the house that's on it and erect a new house, and they just leave it alone since it wasn't part of the original?
I suppose it's possible. I don't know. I don't know of any cases where people just went ahead and took down a house that it was haunted and then found that it wasn't after that. I do recall one story at Gettysburg that I think one of the park rangers told in one of his books, that he was talking about how he'd get up in the morning, and he was living in one of the actual original houses on the, you know, near the battlefield, and he would hear the oddest sounds coming from this grove of trees across the way from the driveway there. You know, it was sounds like pails, metal pails banging, and cows, and just sort of barn noises, but there was no barn there. And then when he went back and researched it, he found out that there was a blueprint indicating there was a barn there at the time of the battle, and that bodies had been brought in there who had been wounded or killed in the battle. So it you know, it could be that the land itself can be, you know, holding on to residual energies. Kind of
sort of like an Indian graveyard?
Right, yeah. We don't know enough about that, and it'll probably be the ghost hunters dealing with their cases and bringing them to the people in physics and metaphysical studies and quantum physics, who will ultimately start to answer some of these questions well, you know.
Well, in some cases now, we're able to actually see ghosts, and some people have caught phantasms on film, or at least they claim to have had, and had some pretty convincing pictures. But yet we know energy doesn't have form. So does that mean there's maybe more to a ghost than just energy?
Yeah, and what I found time and again when I researched the spirit, the human spirit, was that we were talking about an energy that's very closely related to what we would call light energy, illumination type energy. So it may not have form as you and I know it, but it may radiate. It may, you know, shine in a way that gets picked up by film.
That's kind of a similar way that ghosts have been known to be described too, isn't it? I mean,
right.
Angels, in other words.
Right, yeah. That they're beings of light. I mean, they're just references about beings of light, I think, in almost every religion, ancient texts. And that seems to be our essence.
I believe the ancient Sumerians called them the Shining Ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had different names everywhere you went. But that would, because, I mean, it's just like I was asking Sandra in the last hour, how do you tell the difference between, say, like a ghost and an angel?
I think part of it is the energy. I think you're going to have to trust your gut. In my book, I talk a lot about chakras, and I always ask people, what are you feeling in your solar plexus, in your gut? Are you afraid of this spirit, or can you stay and study it and try to communicate with it? If part of you just wants to run away, then, it may not be benevolent energy.
Which is, again, I guess, like you say, you'd mostly find the, negative energy in a haunted house is not, somewhere where you lived for years and a family member died there with you. That would probably be more positive energy. So it's, I guess kind of set yourself up then, can't you?
Yeah, in the olden days, we'll go back to, say, Victorian times, it wasn't uncommon for people to, die in their houses and be put in a coffin and be put out for a wake or whatever for a day or so before the funeral. And, we dealt with death right in our homes. But it still happens nowadays. And, again, depending on if that spirit felt like it had to hang on to that house for some reason, is stuck on the earthly plane, or is often choosing to be here instead of going on to the next world. And again, it tends to take the form of a power struggle and more of a turf war thing. Although once in a while, I think you do run into spirits who are just afraid to cross over,
That would make a lot of sense. I had a question come to me just a minute ago, and now I'll be doggone if I didn't lose it, but it was something unique. I remember that. Sometimes these questions will come back to me a few minutes later. Something will remind me. I don't know why I had these little, I like to call them brain farts.
Yeah, we all have those.
But coming back to your book, one of the things I do remember when I read it, because like I said, it's been a while back, was it was a great teaching tool. A great way to learn how to become a medium, different ways to go about doing it. You shared quite a bit. But is there anything in particular that you would like to share that maybe you haven't had a chance to, either in the book or on the show yet so far?
Well, it's funny because sometimes the most recent episodes I've had with doing readings, I've had a couple of them where the person that came to me originally and wanted to speak to a dead loved one brings along a relative who ends up being really a pain to get through. I mean, they end up somehow blocking the process. And that had never been my experience prior to this. I'd always found that doing a reading with a couple relatives of the deceased loved one was good because what one person didn't remember, the other one would. Or what one person didn't recognize from the dead loved one, the other one would. In this case, though, it's really been odd to have a couple relatives involved in something, and they're actually blocking the person who say the widow who actually initially contacted me and wanted to talk to her dead husband, brings a daughter or a niece or something. And it's so strange because maybe I've just run into two clinkers here, but some of them bring in this energy that completely shuts the reading down. And I've had to just very politely say, could I continue this session with your mother and have you get off the extension? And then, once they're gone, everything goes smoothly. So I guess that would be my word of warning to everyone, that you can shut down what could be a successful communication by just bringing in sort of a real naysaying kind of energy or a skeptical energy.
Is that why the ancient mediums used to always say, clear the house of any non-believers?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how they manage it because I've been doing this for 20 years, and it still baffles me when I run into someone who has the ability to block me like that. But you just have to very politely say, your father wants to talk to your mother right now, just your mother. End of discussion. And then we will do another session for you at another point or have you come on the phone later. But and it could be that the spirits themselves would rather just talk with that one individual. And I have also had that happen. I know other mediums have spoken of it too when they're doing a group session. You come to that last person in the room, it's towards the end of the evening, and you haven't read for them, and they feel bad, and you feel bad. And until everybody clears the room and you're there with just that one person, then suddenly it'll work. And it's almost like the spirit involved is saying, I'm not going to talk in front of this whole group. This is a personal thing.
or I'm bashful.
I'm bashful, or it's just we're all going to get emotional here, and I see it coming, and I'm not gonna do this in front of all these people. So again, we have to understand when you do a medium thing, it is a three-way conversation. The medium is doing most of the work of bringing the energy and information through, but you can block it if you come in as a kind of skeptical about it.
Okay. Now, do you, in addition to the books you write, do you also, do readings, I guess you could say, for people like at fairs or festivals or just on your website or on the phone or whatever?
Yeah, I do them in different places. Yeah, for sure. I haven't gone, to a lot of places in the U.S. to do this, although I'm going to start doing that in the next few years. But I do them mainly in my home state of Minnesota, the local Expo, Edge Expo, and I'm going to go do some readings at Annie Wilder's haunted house in Hastings, Minnesota, and so forth. So I have a website where I tell where my events are going to be. And I like the group evenings and stuff. I'm doing one on August 3rd that's just talking to people's deceased pets and even bringing through messages from their current pets, too.
Okay. Now, do you... something I was going to ask you specifically, and I can't remember what it was. That's two things during one show I've lost. My mind must not be 100% here. Oh, I know what it was I was going to ask you now. Do you have any other books out?
I don't. All of my other books are written by Ashlyn Price, and they are historical romances and suspenses. But now that I've finished Soul Sensing, I've done a lot of promo on it. As you know, I was doing a lot of radio spots and podcasts this past winter. It came out about 8 months ago. Now I'm starting to think again about writing something else and what should it be. I'm very picky before I start a project to make sure it hasn't been done to death. And I was very pleased with doing Soul Sensing, How to Communicate with Your Dead Loved Ones, because there were so few books on this subject. And the San Francisco Book Review called it truly a how-to. Really, an easy guide to get through and that sort of thing. And I was so pleased that they called it what it was, which is a how-to book, actually instructing people and talking to their dead loved ones. Again, it's not about how to hunt for ghosts or talk to, spirits you don't know. It's very specific. So I'm going to see now as I work on these different ideas what else will come to me that I think will be of value to people.
That reminds me what the thing was that I had the original brain fart over. I think I remember when I read your book that most of the tools you needed to do the medium work was very inexpensive and in some cases even findable around the house. Wasn't that true?
Yeah. A pendulum, there are weight specifications in my book, but most people have somewhere in the house a locket on a chain. And provided that's lightweight enough, you can use that as a pendulum for yes, no, and maybe kinds of questions to your deceased loved one, if that happens to be whatever you pick in the book to work with. And I suggest you try all of the methods, like playing cards, tarot cards, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Make sure you are comfortable with it, that you feel comfortable. Some people don't like tarot cards, so they might be happier with a deck of angel cards. And just getting comfortable conversing with that loved one and learning how to just test them a little bit and make sure that you're talking to who you want to talk to. One of the biggest mistakes anybody can make is to walk into a room in a seance-like fashion and say, is anybody there, on the other side who wants to talk to us? Well, yeah, but that's like flinging your door open to, just anybody who wants to wander in. You've got to be much more specific about who you're trying to attract and talk to on the other side.
So if you're not careful, you could get a lot of mental damage done, perhaps, or emotional or spiritual?
I think emotional more than anything else. I just think that it's foolhardy to invite people, just in without knowing who they are. And that's what we see oftentimes in movies, is this medium who says, if anybody would like to, they all join hands at the table for the seance. Is there anyone on the other side who'd like to talk to us? Well, that's a bad idea. That's really a bad idea. And I doubt that most professional mediums do that. I think they come in specifically knowing the group that they're going to do a reading for. And they ask specifically for those people. I say the Lord's Prayer before I do a medium session, to kind of clear my energy, make sure it's pure, make sure that I have the intention of helping everybody that I'm going to be dealing with. And so I don't want people afraid of this process, but I do want them cautious.
Yeah, I would imagine, because I'm dealing with spirits. I mean, you just don't know. Is there ever any cases where spirits have pretended to be a dead loved one only to turn out to be a harmful spirit in the end?
I haven't heard of that, but I have heard of cases, and certainly there are questions you can ask to make sure you're talking to the right party. Pick information that only you and that deceased party would know, and ask yes/no questions using, say, a pendulum. That's a great way to test. But I have heard of situations where negative spirits have done something in a household, and then the visiting relative is blamed for it. And often what's happening, from what I can tell in these conversations with the spirit world, is that a bad spirit may come through and scare you in a certain setting, and your deceased loved ones come to your aid. And because you recognize a signature from one of them, you think they're the ones who caused the negative behavior. But often they're just coming to your aid. Very often they're acting as guardian spirits.
Yeah, timing's pretty important.
Timing is, yeah, absolutely.
Has there been any cases of, say, a relative dying that was really upset with a loved one that came back from the other side and tried to do harm just to get even?
I don't think I've heard of any cases of that, but I've certainly had clients who were on a bad footing, say with a parent or sibling. And when we do communicate, there's rancor in the conversation. And that always surprises me, I guess, because most of the time people are having a medium session to express love, express the fact that they're so sorry they weren't there at the time of death for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't know this individual was dying. Maybe they couldn't get to the hospital in time. Variety of reasons why that happens. So most people are having a medium session in order to talk about regrets and love and positive feelings generally. And once in a while I will get someone who actually has hired me in order to yell at somebody on the other side. And that might be great Gestalt therapy, but I don't care for it personally. I usually have to shut that down. But there can be a period of time after someone dies who was not on good footing with you, where you may have some bickering going on in your head with that person. And if they're truly in spirit form, and on the other side, they are doing what they can to make amends. It often surprises my clients to find out that the spirits who look out for them the most and do them favors and warn them about danger and so forth are the people they didn't like very well, who are working on their karma on the other side and trying to make amends.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, I'm at your website right now, and I see here that you have classes and events. You want to tell the listeners about that?
Well, they are here in Minnesota, so I don't know how pertinent it'll be for everybody else, but I do teach some classes here in Minnesota about soul sensing, and in a few years, when I have a little more freedom to travel, I will probably be doing some stuff around the U.S.
Okay, and then I'm looking at your services link. What you got in there that you're offering?
Well, I do medium sessions, of course, by phone and in person, by appointment only. I do have gift certificates that I will send out to people if you wanted to give a birthday present to somebody as a psychic reading out. Every every medium is a psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. So, sometimes people want to give a birthday gift as a psychic reading, or talking to giving a kind of a consolation gift to somebody who's had a death in the family. It'd be kind of a nice way to be a nice sympathy gift is giving a reading with a medium. I do a money-back guarantee with my medium sessions, and that is to say, if we're not getting identifiable information about your deceased loved one in the first few minutes, we stop the session and I reimburse your payment. I do that kind of thing for sure.
Okay. Now, just to let everybody know, like I said a minute ago, I'm at your website. Now, what I'm seeing is you got a blog on here. You got to look into your book on here. You've got a newsletter, it looks like, and testimonials, and you got a list of your radio spots. I'm assuming those are the ones that are coming up. Your information about yourself, and you got the link to the predictions here and Attention Media here. But I'm pretty sure everybody might want to visit your site at www.janicecarlson.com and look at those predictions, especially, I would think. I haven't actually looked at them myself. Do you have a lot of predictions in there?
Well, they're predictions from Peter Bew, who is a man who died in 2005 of a sudden heart attack. And his wife hired me soon thereafter to do medium sessions for her, usually a couple times a month. And Peter started bringing through information that his wife Laura did not recognize. And he said, for instance, something's going to happen to the Pope. And about, 8 hours later in Europe, someone tried to grab a hold of Pope Benedict, who was Pope at the time, grab a hold of him out of a crowd. And so, we started noticing these weird coincidences that Peter would say this thing, and then it would happen, And so I just started keeping track of Peter's predictions, and I think last I checked there was about 30 of them correct world predictions he'd made. And then they came through. We documented that they came through. But any medium or psychic is probably going to have, some ability to make those kinds of predictions too.
So you've actually made some of these predictions yourself?
I do sometimes. Like, for instance, I think a lot of people felt this, but I certainly felt kind of strange before 9/11. I felt before the 9/11 thing, it was the Saturday before it occurred, I was just beside myself. I felt like if I went out and ran 14 miles, I still couldn't get rid of the hyper energy I was feeling, which is very unusual for me, because I'm kind of a slow, calm Taurus type of person. And then I called a couple psychic friends and I said, do you feel this? What is going on? Are you feeling something? And none of them recognized it. But I noticed that the summer before 9/11 happened, I was having all these dreams about aliens flying into tall buildings, like spying, looking in windows. And I meant like space aliens, So parts of that work came to be true. But usually if a psychic is feeling uncomfortable about things and uneasy, and it's not something within his or her own life, then generally something's about to happen. I don't mean to become the Mothman here, but we tend to know when some event is happening that's quite big, and we may not be able to give you a whole bunch of pieces, but some.
So you said something about aliens a minute ago. Do you think we're going to have some kind of disclosure in the near future?
I think we will, to tell you the truth. I really do. I know NASA just issued that statement yesterday about that they feel in the next 2 decades we probably will be able to document intelligent life in the universe. So I think, we probably will. Do
you think this document that you saw released might be a step in the direction of preparing people for the information that's to come, because maybe all the governments are deciding to get up off the information and they want to ease it to everybody a little at a time? Yes.
Yeah, I do think there's a kind of a trickle-out kind of thing going on.
That's the terminology I was looking for. Thanks.
Yeah, I think they're, to ease into this a little bit because it's pretty, you know, for those who've seen UFOs and extraterrestrials, it's not big news, but, you know, for the public at large, I guess you might see some panic and that kind of thing. I think we're a little more sophisticated than that, but, you know, the government may be not sharing that view and be afraid of panic.
Well, maybe they got a good cause. I mean, most Americans today, at least Americans, I think, would not be that big on panicking. You know, we don't seem to be that kind of a people that I can tell. However, having said that, there are the religious institutions in America that if E.T. walked up in there and sat in the pew and said, I want to get saved, that they're liable to freak out.
I guess I've never really seen a big connection between extraterrestrials and religion. You know, I don't know why I haven't, but I guess I've just never really seen that would really throw religion off its base. No one can say for sure that there aren't extraterrestrials in the next world, in heaven, you know.
Oh, I grant you, and I understand where you're coming from. I didn't mean it would be coming from the aliens' direction, though. I meant from the actual church members, because a lot of church members, not all, mind you, but a lot of them are, well, God only made our world, and this is His only creation, and we're the only thing that matters to Him. We're the only one that needs to be saved, and they think that if aliens come from another planet, well, then all of a sudden this is blasphemy, or it's Satan, it's, you know, disguised as UFO. My sister is a churchgoer who once said she thought that the UFO phenomenon was Satan.
Wow. Wow.
Sounds unbelievable, but I swear it came out of her mouth, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I don't know what doctrine that is, but.
So I'm just saying, from any believers that would approach it from that perspective, it can mess up their day, in other words, but not everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, it's going to force everybody to redefine things, there's no question. But it's an awfully big universe out there.
Yeah, that is true.
Obviously, for it just to be us here, you know.
That'd be pretty doggone wasteful, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You're not playing pool. You don't have no pool sticks out in space. What are all these billiard balls for if you're not to stick life on?
Right, exactly. But I have to admit my area of expertise is certainly not with UFOs. And my main thing in writing Soul Sensing was that I knew that spirits, even in my own life, having had two parents die by the time I was 10, death became part of my life very early. And it was really profound. It had a very profound effect. For a long time, I spent a long time running away from death. I wouldn't watch movies where someone dies at the end. I'm still kind of weird about that. I just, you know, it was something. And now that I've talked to people on the other side, I'm so much calmer about that whole subject because I know we can continue to communicate with them. And I know that it takes them a lot of energy to communicate with us, and if it didn't, they would do it far more often. So that was part of the reason with writing the book, was just to say, don't miss this wonderful gift of communication with the spirit of your loved ones. Don't miss that. You know, don't miss the fact that just because your dad died at 10, he's still part of your life, and he still sees the stuff that's going on in your life. You know?
Right.
Yeah. And I've seen spirits like Peter Buse take a really active part in their families' lives. I mean, I remember one situation where they were about to go, his widow and daughters were going to go to some block party. And he said, enjoy yourself, have a good time, but don't eat the potato salad. And everybody got sick but them because they didn't eat the potato salad.
So I remember reading that in your book.
I don't know if I put it in the book.
You did, because I got a memory of it.
Okay.
Or I got it from somewhere.
I thought, either that or we talked about it the last time I was on your show. But I thought, well, that's kind of a useful tip. You know, the fact that they kind of slide forward in time a little bit, you know, and they're able to kind of foresee something that you might find really helpful to know. I mean, people might think you're crazy if you said to them, I'm not going to eat the potato salad because my dead husband warned me against it. I'm sure they didn't tell people that, but they were healthier for it, right? Mm-hmm. And I really do think our spirits, our loved ones, and our guardians do look out for us and try to warn us. We've all had it happen where you're about to get into a car and go somewhere or take a flight or something, and something happens to that group of travelers, and you think, well, thank God I didn't do that.
So actually, when it comes down to it, if you're not aware of the message you're getting from a deceased loved one, or if you're ignoring it or trying to ignore it and afraid of it, whatever, you could actually be setting yourself up to be in danger's way.
You could be. I mean, it's very likely that that they are trying to look out for you. Most of us, don't face danger every day in our jobs and our lives, but, I think you do need to listen to your gut. And if something in your chakras is saying, don't do this, or go for it with some particular thing, I think that's certainly worth listening to.
Especially if you just had an opportunity for a job and you're uncertain about it, maybe they're trying to tell you it's one that's got great pay. Right.
And my book has a whole chapter about chakras, just because those are the places, those are the points on your body where spirits are most likely able to communicate with you and to give you. I had a dog who passed away, and I was just inconsolable. And then I just felt his energy in my solar plexus, and it brought me such a sense of peace. I just couldn't imagine living without this big yellow lab in my life, but I got such a sense of peace and warmth there that I would see him again in heaven, and that everything was okay. And it just affected me in a way that almost bypassed my brain. I wasn't mentally processing it anymore. And those chakras are very powerful portals to your soul. So, those by themselves are worth learning about.
Okay. Now, you just led me into another question, by the way, and that is, have you ever had any communication from people's pets, for example?
Oh, yeah. There are people who call and they've got a deceased pet and they want to talk. And, when you think about it, so many of us pet owners have to make the decision to put an animal down, and that's a very difficult place to be. And so many people call and just say, does he understand that I had this done for his own good? That's a really tough position to be put in. And it's comforting to hear what the animals have to say about that. And very often what they'll say is, I left the veterinary clinic with you. I went in spirit back to the house. And then, people will talk about hearing the dog jump off the bed the next day, or feeling warm spots on the bed where he used to lie, So there are lots of signs. The signs with animals are a little bit more subtle, and they're much more kind of visceral. They're much more about feeling, tactile feeling, because that's how you communicated with your animals more, with, hugging them and petting them and stuff that we don't do as much with other human beings.
Okay. I was just thinking about that. So basically, once animals pass away, then they pretty much would speak the same kind of language that we would speak for a medium to be able to understand, or has everybody got a whole entire, like a mental language on the other side?
I think it's a mental language. I really think it's telepathic. I feel like there's probably a spirit guide who's helping me out with language interpretation when I talk to deceased pets, but they certainly bring through a lot of images. I had one dog that I read for who he just had to convey the fact that he showed me a dead chicken. He showed me himself being yelled at by the master of the household, and then the lady who owned this dog was a little girl when the dog first came to her home, and she told me the backstory on it. She said, well, he killed a chicken, on our farm. And my father was very strict about that. If any of the, our pets try to kill livestock, they're out of here, they're dead. And he was going to shoot that dog. And because that's how these people make a living on the farm. You can't have animals, killing your livestock. But she begged and pleaded and talked him out of it. And somehow or another, that dog knew that his life had been saved by that little girl.
So it's kind of like a way of coming back from the other side and thanking them.
Saying, what I've since learned over here is that I could have been taken out of the game a whole lot earlier if it wasn't for you. And because of you, we got to spend these years together.
Righty. Now, real quick, because we're getting low on time, is there anything you want to tell the listeners about that hasn't been covered at all?
Only just go on to Amazon.com and take a look at the table of contents of Soul Sensing, and you'll see that it's just really loaded with a lot of information that you need to be aware of visitation by your loved ones, and that they want to be an active part of our lives. And I asked the question, how often would you call upon somebody who never answers their door or their phone? And it's the same with our loved ones in the spirit world. If you don't acknowledge their visitations and the things that they're doing to connect with us, they quit doing it. Because why spend the energy?
Well, I remember when I read your book, I couldn't help but think how useful and handy the book was, not just for people that wanted to branch out and become a medium, but just anybody who had just recently lost a loved one that might have wanted to know how could they get in touch with that loved one, or if they thought the loved one was connecting to them, how would they recognize it? And, you covered so much stuff in there that was so useful, in other words, that it was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you don't have to be a medium by any means. I mean, everybody has these experiences, and it's just a question of acknowledging them and learning to interpret them and how to reply back, how to respond back.
Okay. Now, also, any last-minute thoughts of any kind?
I think we're going to get more, as science addresses ghost hunters and various people who are getting all this evidence on film and audio and so forth. As physicists start to become more interested in this, there will be more and more legitimacy in the field, more and more understanding of what we become when we die, and how to connect with that. I think in the next 10 to 20 years, we're really going to see a lot more advances in science that bring us closer to understanding that transition from the human body to spirit form. Right.
Okay. And once again, folks, you can learn more by going to www.janicecarlson.com. If you go to my site, www.talknowradio.net, you'll find that on the front page, at least for today, is Sandra Sneed, that lady was just on, and Janice Carlson's description, their picture, their biographies, and underneath their description is a link to the book where you can buy it on Amazon. If you would please link to it through there instead of going straight to Amazon, because I do get a commission on it. Also, since I did kind of drop this out earlier and cause a misunderstanding, that show with Chris Everard is going to be this Saturday, July 19th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at talknowradio.net. The player is on the front page up toward the top. If you don't want to chat, you don't need a membership, but if you do want to get in the chat room with everybody else, it does require a free membership, and I do recommend you come early and get the account ready so that you don't have a last-minute rush and then forget to check your activation email, because you will have to, verify your email address by clicking on a link once you do get through filling it out. So if you want to attend, be there or be square. Now, do you ever do any of your readings live on the radio for people, like free readings?
Yeah. I've done some shows where I've done free readings, sure.
Okay, I should have asked you that the last time you was on the show, because I can contact people and ask them would they be interested in that, and then get in touch with you.
Sure. Yeah, you remember I read for your wife, because her parents had just been killed in a car accident.
I do now, but I had forgotten it had been so long. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you do so many shows you can't remember all of that.
That is true, because I've done over 7 years, several hundred shows.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, with that, I can hear the music starting. I know they're going to interrupt us soon. I want to thank you for coming back, and if I can get a list of people together that's interested in coming to hear some reading, I'll give you a call and we can set something up.
That would be great. Thank you, Royce, so much for having me on.
Thank you. I'll see you later.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
These guys are hammers. And to hammers, everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out. We'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. And what good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor. And she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared